Hey everybody, welcome back to the Elevate Cleveland podcast. I'm your host, Chris Doyle. Here is episode 19 with a good friend of mine,
Aaron Grossman. Not Bernie Kosar. Number 19, by the way.
Gotcha. Hey, episode 19 with Aaron Grossman, everyone. So, funny story before we begin, Aaron actually pretty much got me this job at Liberty Home Mortgage. If you remember, this was May of 2018, so the NCAA tournament was done at BW in Cleveland, and I was job searching, and wasn't having a lot of good outcomes just because nothing I was getting was really good enough, the jobs that I wanted. I really wanted something that was, kind of having the same wrestler mindset that I was putting into my career, and I just wasn't finding that. And so, funny enough, I went to one of your networking events with the Wrestlers in Business Network, in May 2018, and I asked you for some advice. You're like, hey, go on the Wrestlers in Business Network and see if any, Cleveland wrestlers are hiring. And I was like, all right, cool. I guess I will. And on the WIBN webpage, I found Hesh Sagafi, Liberty Home Mortgage, was looking for a loan officer. I called him up and I was like, hey, I saw you were looking to hire. I wrestled back in college. Can I get a job with you? And then, hey, 4 years later, here we are. So I have
Is this actually being recorded right now?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Because honestly, for Wrestlers in Business Network, our whole thing now is really hyper focused on getting all of the college athletes and all of wrestling at any division to go to our career board. So we have a fully launched career board for Wrestlers in Business Network under the same premise that there's a lot of great athletes that are graduating from the sport that aren't going to be coaching or in wrestling and want to find a job that's comparable to what they lived with in their wrestling career.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of employers who want to hire wrestlers, so we want to be that center point throughout the United States for those student athletes graduating, ready to go in their professional career, and businesses that want to hire them.
100%.
So you just gave a great case study of how this works. Well, it does work.
It's proof, right? It's right there. So more than happy to talk more about that later. But Aaron, talk about yourself for a little bit. You have serial entrepreneur, I guess you could call yourself. But where'd you grow up? What are you doing today? Talk a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit about myself. So again, my name is Aaron Grossman. I'm 48 years old. I'm born and raised here in Cleveland, Ohio. And I always, when I talked about my life story, there are two moments that I think that got me into where I'm at now as an entrepreneur. One was my parents. They were very entrepreneurial people. Mm-hmm. They were never really very successful as entrepreneurs. But what they did teach me was how to think differently about everything. And one of the coolest things that I recall and remember and really have made part of how I think about things was when I was in fifth grade. They had a business, a recycling business, before recycling people really knew what that was.
Yeah.
Right. And it went bankrupt. And my parents couldn't afford, I think it was the gas bill. I remember we had an electric stove, and my mom would boil the water for like a couple of weeks and put it in the bath so we could take a bath before we went to school. Mm-hmm. Well, my brother and I were also delivering the Cleveland Plain Dealer down the street. And we hated it. I was wrestling at the time. Both my brother and I wrestled since we were 6 years old. And, I was training a lot and going to school. I didn't want to wake up that early and deliver newspapers. So my parents decided to take over our route basically so that they could pay the gas bill.
Yeah.
But what they found out in thinking differently about things was that they could charge whatever they wanted to at that time to the end user. Mm-hmm. So their idea was like, let's go find a bunch of affluent or rich communities, deliver the newspaper to them, charge a premium, and see if they can make some money. And eventually, within 6 months, they were delivering to 2,000 people a day, making over six figures.
Gee.
And it really, at that time, back in the mid 80s, it was high school kids, 12-year-old kids that were delivering the newspaper. My parents actually were part of the transformation into making it an adult profession in the way they did. And so 4 years later, there was a depots and all these adults were delivering newspapers like my parents did. So I always took that as a big part of how I look at my life and how I come up with ideas, just think differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then wrestling. Wrestling was something that I think ultimately I'd say saved my life and really gave me the attributes that I truly live by today. I started wrestling when I was 6 years old and just fell in love with the sport. mainly because I think the biggest competition you have is with yourself.
Yes.
How much are you willing to put in? How much are you willing to have a mindset of what it takes to win? Mm-hmm. And those things are a part of your life experience. You will always experience that in every aspect of your journey, of those fears, that anxiety, the motivation, the inspiration, the work when you don't want to do the work. Mm-hmm. All of those things are a part of growing up in the sport of wrestling. And I fell in love with it. And that was a huge part of why I am who I am today. Mm-hmm. And partially the reason why I created the Wrestlers and Business Network back in 2009, I think it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I graduated from Beechwood High School here in Cleveland, Ohio on the east side, and had the opportunity to wrestle in college. So I went to Miami University. They had a team at the time. At the time when I started, we were a top 20 team in the country. And wrestled there for 5 years. Was their 190 pounder. Was a MAC place winner. Didn't accomplish the things I wanted to in college, but I learned a lot. And I think a lot of, quite honestly, as I talked about earlier, you're always battling different things in your life, and a lot of it, those things you're battling are inside your head, right? And I had a tremendous amount of anxiety when I would get on the mat. So oftentimes in both high school and college, my coaches would get incredibly upset with me because in practice, I was a very different wrestler than what I was when I actually on the mat.
Yeah.
And it was something that I never could overcome in competition, but it was absolutely the number one influencer in my success in business, because I basically have told myself ever since then that I will never let that stop me. I will never let my anxiety stop me from achieving my goals. And so I've just taught myself how to push through those moments, which happen all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just push through it. And the results have been everything I wanted to achieve in wrestling. I'm able to achieve in my professional career, which has been great. So I started out of college. I sold insurance, like commercial insurance to businesses, to actually health and fitness clubs. And did that for a couple of years. One of the things I learned in that moment was how important culture was. So it was a small company. There was about 10 people in that company, and most of them were the same family name. And the wife was the secretary, and she was mean, like mean. Like I worked there for 2 years, and she was right there when you'd come into the office, and would never say hi, ever. Never, not once.
Or
just didn't want to. She hated that I was there. She actually wanted her husband to retire and was just furious that I was there. So every day I walked into that office, it just pissed her off. And so it was so quiet there. I remember one time I actually, I didn't know any better. I was 22 years old. I went and grabbed like toilet paper and would wet it and just throw it into cubicles just to see if people were alive.
Yeah.
We actually got, one day somebody knocked on our door live on the radio. Someone voted us the Scrooge of Cincinnati.
Really?
So it was not a...
It's not a good reputation.
No, not a good reputation. Not a fun place to work at.
Yeah.
And I think I always remember that as when I got a chance to start my own business of what I meant to really have a vibrant culture. And you guys have a great culture here. Just coming into the room and just seeing how the office is laid out. It's really cool.
Yeah,
it's important. So then I remember putting my resume on Monster.com at that time, which was where you went to go find jobs, and got a call from a staffing agency, an employment agency. It's called Robert Half. It's one of the largest in the world. I had never heard of this industry, like the employment industry. Yeah, didn't know that people pay other people to find them people. Yeah, like that's kind of weird to me, or at least it was weird to me when I first was introduced to it. But like you talked about earlier, I actually ended up starting in that job. And one of the first, I remember exactly where I was sitting, and in the moment, it was like I think I lifted my head up. It was like 5:15 in the afternoon, and I'm like, this is awesome. Like there's just so much to do. It's as much as I want it to be, just like wrestling. You could be as good as you want to be if you put the time, effort, and energy into it. And so I'm like, wow, this just reminds me of wrestling. And then I started thinking about like, how do I say things to people in a way that gets multiple people to agree and move forward together so that I can make money? And so I just looked at it as everything about what I was doing felt like I was in a wrestling match every single day. And that was really what I was looking for. And so I fell in love with it, ended up performing really well for the company. I think it was their top producer in like 6 states, like 200 people, whatever. got a chance to manage an office. They moved me up to Columbus, Ohio. And at that time, I was like a year and a half into it. And I really spent the first maybe 8 months, 9 months of really trying to understand the business and understand what they were teaching and why they were teaching me that way. Mm-hmm. I recognized later on that that's not how everybody looks at stuff. Like they just take what they're given and do it. I really want to understand why you were telling me to do it this way. Mm-hmm. And I think that really helped evolve me as an entrepreneur as I look back. But I got a chance to manage, and actually when I got a chance to manage, I got a chance to input some of my own little nuances that I had started to kind of make as part of my way of doing what we do. And we took I took the division that I was running to the third fastest growing division in the world for them in 6 months. Mm-hmm. That's when I realized that maybe I didn't, I didn't need to have this like $1 billion company, in the background. I could do this on my own. And I started getting excited about maybe starting my own business. Mm-hmm. And then I got incredibly lucky because I had no money. I didn't have money to start a business. Didn't know what it would take to start a business, but literally had one conversation with somebody who had been higher up in the organization at Robert Half and had recently left to start this distribution company with his brother in Ohio and Pennsylvania, where they were going to sell this thing called Red Bull. Mm-hmm. Before anybody knew what Red Bull was. They ended up, doing really well and being the sole distributors of it.
Of course.
But he knew me and said, I absolutely think you could start your own business, and I have somebody who might be interested in financing you. And so he introduced me to a gentleman by the name of George Morales, and there was Rich Lindbergh, his partner as well. They were up in Detroit, Michigan. And so I got a meeting with them on a Saturday morning, and I had no idea how to write a business plan, so I didn't. I think I had a spreadsheet that I created and drove up 3 hours to meet with them and just was really passionate. I wish I could have recorded what I said, but I was just really passionate about what I thought we could do. Mm-hmm. And the next day he called and said, I'll invest in you. And I think he gave me $250,000. And he technically was the majority owner of the business, but gave me the money to get started. And then, so that was luck number one. First of all, to get money and not have to actually go out and pitch to a bunch of people. I just got it.
First try, yeah.
But, he also was a believer in that, yes, he's putting money at risk, but he was doing it because he believed I was that horse, that person who can make it happen. So he actually let me have an entrepreneurial experience, which meant that every time I wanted to ask him how to do something, his answer was, figure it out, make it happen, which is actually one of our core values now. It took me a couple of years to figure out exactly why he was saying that to me, but it was all about, hey, if you believe in something and you can see the path and you can see the path to get there, go figure it out. Yeah. You'll figure out the answer.
So he was pretty convinced just by your overall demeanor, your passion. I mean, you could probably, see it on your face, I would imagine.
That's, when I bought him out in 2011, I'll never forget us walking to lunch over here at Delmonico's. And I said, why did you do this? Like, why did you invest in a 27-year-old kid you didn't know? He's like, and he held up the check next to me. He's like, I have no effing idea, but I'm glad I did. So I don't know why he did, but maybe it was that.
Yeah.
So, but he let me have an entrepreneurial experience, which meant I was allowed to fail and fail forward. So, I think that, I actually have tried to put this into the construct of our business, but I think failure is a part of the journey. Mm-hmm. And so often we are so guarded to fail, and we just don't want to make that part of the experience. But I absolutely think, and I think a lot of it has to do with wrestling. Wrestling, none of us were undefeated throughout our career. Mm-hmm. We lose. Some lose more than others. But when you lose, you have the opportunity to learn. And if you have the opportunity to learn, there's no such thing as losing, right? And so I learn a lot from making mistakes. And this man gave me the opportunity to make a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And through those mistakes, I was able to really build a foundation of a business that was able to scale. And so I started Alliance. It was Alliance Staffing Solutions, and we started at July 4th, 2001. I remember flying back from Texas. My girlfriend, who became my wife, who's not my ex-wife, but we're still friends.
Yeah.
She was mad when I flew back, and to start on July 4th, she's like, no one's going to be open. I'm like, that's the point. We just want to make phone calls and just figure out what it feels like to represent a company that we just created, right? And so we made calls all that day, and I learned how to network computers because we couldn't afford to get somebody to come in and properly network computers. So if you came into our office back in 2001, it was actually kind of a funny experience. Like in the main room, there was 3 of us. Cords everywhere.
Really?
I figured out how to network computers, but I didn't know how to
Fire
hide the cords. So we were walking on them for like the first 2 years, and then we couldn't afford a receptionist. So when a candidate would come in, I created this whole process where they would have to ding one of those ding ding dings,
Yeah.
and so we knew someone was there. And then I had a thing scripted out telling them what to do step by step, and then to ding again when they were ready to be interviewed.
Yeah.
So we just tried to figure out the most efficient way and the most inexpensive way to do the work that we needed to do. And we just worked really hard and eventually started to gain clients. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool. I mean, we grew from 0 to $20 million in revenue in our first 6 years, which would be hyper growth in a Cleveland-based company. Mm-hmm. I didn't even think anything of it. Like I just thought, like, this is what we do. We're going to get to where we're going. Now, in getting there, there was a lot of journeys that I want to keep talking about all that stuff. There was a lot of mistakes that were made, and bad people that were a part of the experience with me that we had to remove. But we got there, and I still didn't think that I was an entrepreneur, even though I was starting a company. Mm-hmm. I probably have some level of imposter syndrome that exists. And so I didn't know if I was good at doing what I was doing or not. And in 2009, I joined this thing called the Entrepreneurs Organization, which was an absolute game changer for me. It's a nonprofit organization that its mission is to engage leading entrepreneurs to learn and grow. So you have to be the owner of your business. You have to have at least $1 million of revenue, mm-hmm. and you're with a bunch of your peers. And the whole concept is to share experiences, to get really vulnerable about the things that you normally don't talk about with others. Mm-hmm. But this era of confidentiality exists within your forum, so that you can feel free to kind of expose yourself.
Did you find that pretty sobering when you met other people that were at your level? Because I often hear a lot of times just like it's very lonely at the top, right? When it's just, hey, I don't have a lot of people to relate to because I'm at this level, I'm working here, and no one's matching my pace, so sometimes you get lonely. I don't know if going to something like that, was it more sobering for you to be like, all right, hey, these people are pretty empathic to my experiences?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Like you immediately didn't feel like you were on your own island anymore. Mm-hmm. There were other people who were living the same life you had, just in a different way. And they were all willing to share with you their journey mm-hmm. around it. And I learned so much from my time with an EEO, and I'm with a forum of 8 other business owners that we meet every month for 4 hours and just talk about, either it's business topics or personal topics, but just really helped me understand A, how to run a business, B, how to live my life while running a business, and C, how to make an impact in my community. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that I just didn't know how to do or didn't even know you could do. Mm-hmm. And I learned from other people's experiences and their journey that could be a part of my experience too. And mm-hmm. so it's really helped me become, more of a 360 human being in a way in which I want to represent myself, mm-hmm. Which has been awesome.
So talk about like your current companies your current company you're recruiting for, right? Talent Launch, you're the CEO of Talent Launch, and just, I guess I don't know enough about recruiting and staffing to understand how, like, the logistics, other than just, hey, we're placing you applicant here and placing you at this job. Like, obviously that's not very detailed, but just kind of explain it. I just don't understand as much.
Yeah, there's the way I try to explain it is there are 2 sides to our industry. There's the staffing side, which I just simply put as temporary staffing. So if somebody's going on maternity leave, or somebody quit without a notice, or maybe they want to hire somebody on a temporary basis, see how they work before they hire them on permanently into their business to help mitigate some of their risk. So that's staffing mm-hmm. in a lot of ways. Recruiting is really more about direct placement. So let's say there's a company that has a hard time finding an executive level role or a mid-manager role, and they may not have an internal recruiter to do that work. They might they might work with a third-party agency like one of my companies does to find them that talent on a permanent basis. And in that case, they'll charge a fee when they've created a successful placement. In other cases, that's called contingent recruiting. And then there's retained recruiting, and that's usually done at a higher level, usually the C-suite, where a company will actually pay us up front, like a portion of the total fee, to make sure that we're hyper-focused on getting the result that they need. And so it just, on a contingent basis, we don't get paid until we make the success. So, if we don't feel the order is a really good one, we might focus more of our attention on something else. If it's retained, our focus is on making sure that we're taking care of the client and their client needs are met. So that's kind of a general overview of staffing and recruitment, and both exist within the work that I do at Talent Launch. So back in 2012, so when I hit that $20 million mark in 2007, I think it was 2007, I was like, this is easy, So I suddenly started declaring, like, we're going to be a $100 million company or $20 million in gross margin on an annual basis by the end of 2016. I kept saying it to everybody because I'm typically the kind of person that once I telling everybody it, now it's a commitment, I have to figure it out.
For sure.
After the recession of 2009, we actually had gone down to $12.5 million in revenue, but we made money that year. And we immediately, we're in a position of hyper growth. So we went to 12.5, 25 million in 2010, 32 million the year after, 42 million the year after that. What I recognized, though, because I had made this commitment to getting to $100 million, is that the way in which I was operating the business model, I couldn't see how to get to that number at that time. And being committed to being committed to doing the things I say I'm going to do when I say I'm going to do it, I'm like, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
So it was roughly around 2012, 2013 where I actually stopped focusing on just running my business and refocused on how to redesign my business. And I made some really big investments into technology, hired more people to my executive team to get more people to think strategically about how to get to where we want to go. And one of the aha moments that came to fruition, which is how Talent Launch came to be, was we were providing shared services like marketing, legal, accounting and finance, IT, to 6 different staffing companies that I had started here in Cleveland. They all shared the name Alliance, but they were actually different LLCs, different people running those businesses, and they were focused on different verticals within the staffing or recruitment space.
Yeah.
So I was thinking at that time, I'm like, well, why can't we buy a company that we didn't have to start? Why can't we buy a company and provide the shared services to them? So got really, really lucky again, where my first acquisition happened to be a company here in Cleveland called Major Legal Services, and they focused just on legal staffing. We didn't have anything like that in our portfolio. So they were small. So we were able to, take a risk, learn what this acquisition thing looked like. We maintained their brand name at the time, and it worked out great. And so that was like the start of that, saying, okay, maybe this could be a much bigger thing. Now, one of the things I did during that time that I think a lot of people in Cleveland probably know me for is my passion for culture. And I'm the kind of person that when I'm thinking about an idea, and it's not something I have a lot of expertise around, I interview as many people as I can that might have expertise in that idea to help me formulate whether this is something I should do, what I should be worried about, what I should be focused on. One of the things I learned about acquisitions is that it's really easy to find a company to buy that's making money. It is incredibly difficult to integrate those companies and be successful going forward. And almost always, culture is what gets in the way of that. So I actually spent, from 2012 to 2014, an incredible amount of time really trying to understand culture. I had worked with a consultant who helped us kind of define our original mission, vision, and values, which helped represent culture. But it wasn't good enough for me. It's to think differently that my parents always said. And actually, it's an interesting story. In 2000, I think it was 2012, I got engaged to my wife, my now wife, and we in San Francisco area. We saw our first redwood tree forest together. Have you ever seen a redwood tree before?
No.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Like the trunk is as big as this room. Like literally, all these trees are huge, and I was just amazed by it. It felt like I was in a comic book or something like that. Anyways, I typically apply everything I see in life to business. I think it's all interconnected. And I thought to myself, okay, the values of a business are very similar, or I believe they're the same thing as the roots of a tree, right? And so you can have great values that you live by, just like a redwood tree has these massive roots that allow these trees to grow to the size that they are. But if you don't have the right environment, because guess what? Redwood trees grow in the Pacific Northwest. They don't grow here in Cleveland, Ohio. They don't grow in the Midwest. Why? Because those roots need a certain type of environment to grow. So if all businesses, I believe, have their own set of core values, whether they're intuitively or intently living by them or not, they are living by a set of core values, which are the roots of their tree. If you don't have the right environment around those roots, you can't grow your tree into a redwood. So it wasn't just about the core values of or the roots of our tree. It was what type of environment. What are those clouds, that air and nutrition that we need to build around our tree so that we can grow a redwood tree anywhere in the world?
Yeah.
And that's really where this redwood tree concept that I created came about. And it's really helped. It changed my life.
So do you think that's like, okay, so for anyone starting a business, entrepreneur, whether it's like your own core values or you're a business and you're trying to start your own core values, is that before you start scaling, do you think in your opinion you should start with, hey, this is our culture, this is our mission, vision, and if you don't fit within these lines, then get out? Do you think you start there, or where do you start? Well, I think what's like most important, I guess, in your opinion?
I think in starting a business, it's the most important thing is to get traction to it. Like, so culture, you are, again, inherently living a culture. The day you start your business, who you are as a person is what's going to be represented in how you run your business, period. So, and typically you're not hiring 30 or 40 people right out the gate to start your business, right? So there's really a small group of people, or just you and somebody else that's just going at it. So it's really about getting traction around the business that you've started, and that traction represents also the culture that you're building around it, whether you know it or not, right? For me, it wasn't until I think I had my 20th employee that I started to really look up and say, okay, there's a few people working with me now.
Yeah.
There's 100 companies that are working with this company that I started. Why? And it was asking those questions over and over again, and really looking deep into who I am and my character to really understand what are those core values that I've been living by this whole time. I just didn't quantify them. And the moment that I was able to put these attributes or these values on paper, and then also couple them with the environment, the pillars that we are all meant to support. Once I put that together into this redwood tree concept, it's been so cool to see how many people are inspired or connected and want to come be a part of this journey with me.
Do you ever get kind of just like juiced up when you hear someone else talk about your core values and your pillars or anything, like just from a third party, like, oh, they were talking about that, they really have good buy-in? Like, does that like make you pretty happy?
Oh, it's one of the coolest things that when I come across that, one of the coolest things that I see. I remember I was at an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award dinner with the new winners a couple of years ago, and I was sitting next to one of them, and we were just getting a chance to know each other. And the husband's like, "Oh, we were in your office. Yeah. You had the redwood tree. Yeah. I love that. Those values. I love that. That's amazing." Another one, which was even cooler. In Cleveland, there's the Smart 50 Awards, and it's for like this, Smart Business runs it, and we're a sponsor of it. But I was one of the judges for people. I think there were maybe 50 or 60 honorees that came in for a whole day of judging, and then you pick like 4 of the big winners. Well, this one woman, and she had a presentation to share, and part of the presentation was her version of a tree
Oh,
with
no.
her values. She
Really?
and she looked at me and she's like, "Yes, Aaron, I copied you."
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the best testament.
Yeah.
When someone, thinks so highly of what you've built that they want to do a little R&D, a little rip off and duplicate and make it their own. That's a wonderful thing because, our culture to me is not just a representative of how to run a business. It's how to live a life.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about it. And, again, once that was created for me, it helped me really understand who I was as a human being, what I wanted to represent, and who I would be moving forward. And that's been one of the greatest gifts I think I've given myself in my life, was to really create that concept, because it not only has helped us scale the business. I mean, I think, when I really formalized that, we might have had, by that time it was done, we probably had 40 or 50 employees. Now we have, upwards of 350 employees throughout the United States. And the centerpiece of all of these companies that we have acquired, which long-winded way of getting there, was once I formalized this Redwood Tree culture, I felt I had the confidence to go to anywhere in the United States, find other staffing companies that were in my industry, but find our tribe, people who were like us, people who wanted to be a part of something that represented the values of the Redwood Tree.
Sure.
And it's been working. So we've been acquiring businesses since 2014, and what we do is we maintain their brand identity. So the founder, when it's really, we look to buy successful staffing companies who don't have a succession plan, and so that founder. We're really kind of the only outfit in the United States that says, hey, we'll buy your company. We're going to maintain your legacy. We're going to maintain your brand legacy, and your business will go on with us. And hopefully, and we try to show the founder all the tools, all the bells and whistles that we've created, which we're really, I want to say we're a very innovative and progressive company in our industry, to show them how safe they feel knowing that their baby's coming into our network, and we're going to take care of them, and we're going to help them grow and stay relevant for the next 25 to 30 years.
So do you have a plan of how many businesses you actually want to buy per year? Or is it just like, oh, you see, something, a staffing company in Pittsburgh, and you're just like, all right, well, they have no succession plan, let's do it? Or is there like, hey, we need to do 5 a year? Or
I mean, in our current trajectory, it's like, between 1 or 2 a year. Ultimately, we want to get to a place where we have processes built out where we can acquire, 4 to 5 a year. Really, it's about our ability to integrate them and have the resources available to provide a good experience. That's why we can't add that kind of volume on today, but we're building towards it.
So where are you in comparison? So you said back when you first started, Robert Half was the biggest, right, in the world, staffing,
one of the biggest.
So where does Talent Launch fall now as compared to Robert Half? Because again, I don't know enough.
Yeah, so interesting. So our industry, there's about roughly, let's say, 20,000 staffing firms. It's about $160 billion, $170 billion a year industry. 99% of all staffing firms do less than $50 million in revenue a year, and 97% do less than $25 million. So it's a very fragmented space. I think we're we'll do close to $200 million this year in revenue, which will put us probably at or around the 100th or top 100 largest staffing firms in the U.S.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And our goal is to be $1 billion in revenue by 2028. So we'd like to have roughly, let's say, 30 to 35 staffing companies that are a part of the Talent Launch Network. That I think that we'll get to our goal when we make that happen.
Getting to that standpoint, I mean, that puts you in Cleveland as like one of the biggest companies, I would imagine, right? I mean, you're right up there with like Cleveland Cliffs, Cleveland Cliffs and Sherwin-Williams. I mean, you'd be pretty competitive at that point, right?
It would be cool to say that someday.
Do you ever see yourself going going public or anything, or?
Talked about it. I really, you get into other aspects. I'm not a huge fan of taking a company public, mainly because I think the shareholders that I want to report to are those people that have made the business happen.
Got it. Yeah.
I would love to get to a place where we're an incredibly healthy business, a very large business, like you just mentioned. And we're giving rewards back to those that made it happen versus people who are invested in the company in that way. So, not saying I would never go public, but that's not my intent.
So what's your plan then? So until 2028, when you're $1 billion company, right? What are the big landmarks, like the milestones you have to hit to be able to get to that point? Is it just continue what you're doing right now, or are there big milestones, like I said, you have to hit first?
Not necessarily any big milestones. I mean, the one big milestone is really centered around organic growth, which is an industry-wide problem. So I said, we're buying companies. Let's say that most of the companies that we're buying are roughly around $25 million in revenue, and those companies have been that way probably for the last 5 to 10 years before we acquired them. And so it is a known barrier of growth in our industry. And so what we're doing, and this is the work that we're doing right now, is building out processes, integrating technologies, trying to do everything we can to supercharge these operating companies, these staffing companies, so they can blow past that $25 million mark and start to scale. And I think once we've officially solved for that, which hopefully will be by the end of this year, I think founders that want to sell their company, they're going to want to sell their company to us because they know we will have proven out that we can grow their business and sustain their business for the next 20 years. So, that's the biggest hurdle that we're working on right now to overcome. But our vision is pretty strong around this, and our financial vision around how we execute against it is pretty solid. So I think we just need to stay in our lanes as we look to find those companies to acquire. Now, one of the things that, I've always done, going back to that think differently mindset, right, is, thinking that innovation is one of the ways in which we can help these staffing companies blow past those barriers that exist. And one of the things that I created actually out of our business, I think it was in 2014, was this. We created this whole remote onboarding platform. Initially, it was called Employee Stream, and it morphed into what is now called Able. And it was one of the first times, I didn't know this. Like I had this idea, built out the beginning components of it inside my business. And then I told the CIO, my CIO at the time, Rob Sable, who was co-founder of the business, I said, if you can go and find 5 businesses that aren't our business, then we can go get investment dollars for this. And so I worked with him on that. We were able to accomplish that. And then, during that time, Jumpstart was somebody that we were engaged with. They offered their mentoring services and things of that nature. And so they were close to already knowing kind of who we were, what we were doing. And they decided to become our lead investor when I went out in, I think it was 2017, to go out and get outside capital. Now, in the meantime, I'm running Talent Launch. I didn't have the opportunity to run I didn't have the ability to really run another company at that time. So we ended up hiring a gentleman by the name of Gerald Hetrick. He actually was the COO of one of my best friends, his company. But it was Chris Snyder that came to me and said, hey, listen, my COO he's been with me for 10 years. He really wants to run a company. I know you've got this kind of startup technology company. Maybe you want to talk to him about it. So I did. And he took on the role of CEO. And he's more of a technology operator. And we went off to the races. He did a phenomenal job of raising money and hiring great people. And fast forward 5 years, we had sold the product to over 200 staffing companies. Some of the largest staffing companies in the world bought this product. That we had created, that it came out of my business. And all I was trying to do initially was like, how do I create a better experience for our candidates so we can get more candidates to kind of come want to work for us so that we can place them out on jobs. And that's really what the essence of it was. And the essence, and part of it was too, when I say remote onboarding, what had to happen prior is that if you didn't have a job, you more than likely a temporary agency would ask you to come into the office, fill out an application for literally that took almost like an hour to an hour and a half, then get an interview, and then more than likely walk away without a job, and you didn't have one to come up with. So it was a lot of friction to that process. So I'm like, why can't we figure out a way to do this from from home? Yeah. And fast forward with COVID, where everybody was forced to work from home, it was the perfect
storm, yeah.
Product for to sell to the industry. And we actually just officially sold Able to a company called Bullhorn, which is the largest staffing software provider in the world, back in January, for a significant amount of money, which was really nice. I don't know if we can disclose that publicly, but
we'll leave it at that significant amount of money. That's incredible, man.
It was a great outcome, and even better for me, just personally. Like, I went to a big staffing conference about 3 weeks ago, and Bullhorn had announced that their featured product, everything they're doing moving forward, is centered around Able. Like this thing that we created. Like, I guess it's a lot more powerful than anybody thought. But that was really cool to see something like that born out of our business. But the essence of why it was born is that we're trying to find ways to create a better experience and create better outcomes for these staffing companies that live in our network, so that we can achieve our ultimate goal of becoming a $1 billion company by 2028.
Yeah, amazing. So I want to take it back to wrestling for a little bit, for the WIBN, right? And I know your story about the WIBN, how you've created it. It's a pretty cool story. So just explain what the WIBN is and how you founded it.
Yeah. So, I talked about joining the Entrepreneurs Organization, right? And that being, common people, peers that are under the same pressures of being isolated and running their businesses and all of that. So that was my first understanding of, wow, when you find peers in your business journey, there's a lot of power in that. And then, so I had this idea of got to 21 million in revenue, getting it to 100 million or 20 million by 2016. And then the Great Recession happens, and it happened suddenly in September 2008. I remember when it happened, I felt the effects of it. I was on this journey of growth, and suddenly nobody was hiring.
Yeah.
Like, nobody. It was really, really, really scary. And, my experience with EO, which was very early on at that time, led me to think about, where else can I find my people? And wrestling had been such a big part of my life for so long, but I kind of had exited that community because I was running a business.
Yeah.
I had no time for that. But I wanted to believe that there were other people like me who didn't have time to actually participate in the sport, but everything of who they are is all about wrestling, and so I actually had learned a lot about LinkedIn at the time, and I was looking to see, is there any like professional networking groups that like have a connection to the sport of wrestling? Because it's like, we all have a connection. Doesn't matter where we grew up or who we wrestled for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I couldn't find anything. So I created a group on LinkedIn. I actually remember it was in February, and I was on my bed at 11 o'clock at night when I created the group, and I just said, let's call it the Wrestlers in Business. Let's call it Wrestlers in Business.
Yeah. And
then every night for 3 months, because there was nobody hiring, and not even opening my mail at the time because I was just freaking out. I'm like trying to find people with wrestling in their profile and inviting them to this group and saying, hey, this is a group where we can actually leverage our common connection to the sport of wrestling that we all love, and how do we help each other in our professional careers, whether it's through finding jobs or helping or doing business together. And ultimately, if we come together as a community, we can have the power to really affect the sport in a meaningful way, and not just be focused on the health of the sport and the growth of the sport, because there's so many people like me. I graduated from Miami University. The program was cut a year after I graduated. And so there's a bunch of alumni that wrestled for Miami for many years that doesn't have a place to go anymore. So I wanted Wrestlers in Business in some ways to be that fraternity or that community for all those wrestlers who don't have a home anymore, along with the ones that do. Let's all come together and really get passionate about the sport. And it was really cool. I spent months doing that. And then I still never forget, one day I was in my office and I just checked the LinkedIn group and I had like 30 requests to join.
Yeah.
And I'm like, these aren't 30 people I reached out to.
Yeah.
What is going on? And then I started getting calls from like Win Magazine. And then I got asked by the National Wrestling Coaches Association to come speak in 2011, to come speak at the NCAA's at their annual meeting, and got a chance to meet Dan Gable and all. I'm like, this is what is going on here.
Yeah.
But I think everybody liked the concept. They understood it. They got it. They saw the value in it.
So what's going on with WIBN today? So, obviously I told my story at the beginning of the podcast, how I actually even got to Liberty Home Mortgage and everything. But, kid coming out of college and he says the WIBN, why is that worth it to him?
Well, I think it's a lot of it is just focused access. So now there are thousands of members throughout the United States. There's multiple chapters throughout the country. It's actually, so technically, Wrestlers in Business Network is now a part of the National Wrestling and Coaches Association, although it's still independently branded and run. Mm-hmm. And this past year, we got our first executive director for Wrestlers in Business. He's a retired Colonel, David Fallon. I think he wrestled for Boston University. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, David. But but he's great. And so we have somebody who's hyper focused on educating everybody on the Wrestlers in Business Network. But to somebody coming out of college, it's really your story, right? You met me, who's in business, an employer, and I gave you some advice. You went and took it. And you ended up landing a job that you really love and that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
That's kind of the framework that we want to educate our student athletes on throughout the United States. Right now, a lot of colleges and universities, those wrestling programs, the way they get jobs is through their alumni. What about there's this much larger alumni to help you find the job of your dreams mm-hmm. anywhere you want throughout the United States. Mm-hmm. So we want to be that place, that destination for all student athletes who wrestle at all levels in college. We want them to, create a profile for free. And we want to find ways in which these chapters are really getting hyper-focused on helping those student athletes in their communities get connected to those potential employers mm-hmm. who happen to have, probably have some wrestling background as well, and connecting them up.
Aaron, the crazy thing is, as I get older, I started to realize a good old saying that, every coach has told their athletes is, once you wrestle, everything else in life is pretty easy, right? And I think about that so much, being 4 years into a professional career now, that, damn, when I was wrestling 125 back in college, I was cutting weight and having to go from, morning practice, right to class, right to practice, right to homework. You know what I mean? There's no, no social life after that. It's like, you go into this job now, it's like, dude, I could, you saw our cook upstairs, right? So it's really not as bad as it used to be. And I think that's really, at least in a sales job, it's very transparent, very paralleled with wrestling. But, a lot of those things that you've even learned, that you were talking about when you wrestled at Beechwood and at Miami University, transition into the professional career, right? I just think it's such a tried and true, phrase that once you wrestle, everything in life really is a little bit easier.
I have it on my wall in my office. Dan Gable's picture with that saying on it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, and I think like it's hard to, when you're in the grind, right? It's hard to understand that. Like, I didn't understand that when I was wrestling. Like, okay, yeah, but when you're an adult, you have to pay bills and you have a mortgage and then you have this, that, the other thing. It's like, now that I'm living it, it's like, no, it's really not as difficult as, as I thought it would be. It's just another thing and another obstacle in life you have to confront,
Exactly. And I think, the essence of wrestling in a very simple way is grit. Mm-hmm. And I think, wrestling taught me how to be incredibly gritty and all the time. So like I will do the things people, even in my role, at least from what I've been told from others, that they're like, I would never do that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I'll do anything. I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes to create in a healthy way that creates the outcome I'm trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. If I have a goal, I am going to do whatever it takes to get there.
100%. And that, see, like when you're 100% commission based, like myself, right? I'm 100% commission. So I don't make base salary, hourly, anything, right? It's when I put the work in, I put stuff on social media, I do the podcasting, I reach out to networks, I go and meet agents. You could see the direct result with that eventually. You see the end goal when you put the work in, on the front end. But when you don't do those things, it's a direct result. Like how much you put in is how much you're going to get out. Yep. And I love that. That's why I love doing this job, where it's, all the success is based on how hard you work, right?
Right.
And some days you're not going to get any recognition. Like a lot of guys in my industry now, Aaron, it's getting difficult for a lot of people. So rates have gone up. The Fed raised their Fed funds rate. So a lot of people in the refinance world have basically either moved to purchases, like it's predominantly what we do, home purchases, or they just left the industry. Well, they went from making, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 paychecks per month, and now you're making like $5,000 a month. You go from so high to so low, and I think that at that point, in terms of longevity, it doesn't work for those people, right? They don't have that kind of mindset like, hey, we'll take a loss here and there, but over time we'll make it. Dealing with that kind of loss, I mean, some people just up and quit,
Oh yeah. 2009 was a great example of that for me.
For sure.
I mean, I had 2001 started at 27, creating success, making more money than I had ever thought I would ever make. And then 2009 happens, and like it all changes. And I had to, my CFO and I made huge financial sacrifices. Didn't take money. That's why I wasn't opening my mail, because I wasn't paying my bills either. I was just trying to figure it out. But it was never about like, I should just crawl up into a ball and fail, or I should just quit and do something different. It was like, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to overcome, and I'm going to be better for it. Again, losing in wrestling teaches you a lot of things. Mm-hmm. It teaches you how to overcome loss, how to move forward, how to get back up. Or you get taken down in the first period, and instead of saying, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose this match," I got taken down. I'm going to get back up and get an escape. I'm going to still win this match.
I think the biggest parallel I could make, Aaron, is you're winning, 6-2, right? And then all of a sudden this kid hits a head and arm and you're pinned, or a ref makes a bad call. Things you just can't control in life. For example, everything could be going really well for you, at least like for mortgages, right? Everything could be going super well, and then all of a sudden, an appraisal comes back low, and now the deal's dead. You put in so much work to get this deal done, and then all of a sudden one little factor that you can't control comes back, and now it's a dead deal, right? Well, it sucks, yeah. You put a lot of work into it, and at the end result, you didn't get squat, right? A lot of people would just be, you could see it on their face, right? They're just like, they wear the bad day on their face. Whereas like, dude, if things happen, stuff is going to happen. You just kind of, keep working. You're not going to quit.
Right.
And that's what I love about wrestling, is because I'm conditioned to know these things, Oh,
100%. You reminded me of something that just happened at the state tournament, to one of our best guys, Cody Cuervo, 113-pounder, and love this kid. He's one of our co-captains, hardest worker, doesn't talk a lot, but is a great wrestler.
Sure.
And he made it to the state semifinals and was wrestling this kid from St. Paris Graham, and was literally beating him 3-2 with I think it was 2 seconds left when kid got in a single, dropped him on his butt, got 2 as the whistle blew to win the match. That kid ended up majoring the kid in the finals to be a state champion. Cody, just watching him after that match, he just stared for 2 hours. And the coaches spent a lot of time working with him to help him understand, like, this is an opportunity for you to grow. Like, you're going to deal with this type of loss in your life. It's going to be the things you can't, you may have lost control in that moment, and it's going to be something you can't ever get back. Mm-hmm. But what are you going to do moving forward? And it was I told his parents, Cody's parents, it was one of the most inspiring moments I've had in a long, long time, to see that kid get up the next day and win his next match. And then in the 3rd and 4th place match, had to wrestle a kid that he lost to at the Ironman tournament and beat that kid 6-2 to take 3rd place. And it was him. It was that moment when he took 3rd. All of our kids that were still in the placement round, we all won. We won almost everything. And the team we were competing at for the state to take 2nd in the state lost a lot of their matches that day. And that's his match, I think, was the most critical thing that ended up allowing us to take 2nd place as a team. And because he got back up and kept going. Mm-hmm. And that's a life lesson, mm-hmm. for sure.
And again, how do you tell, so when you are onboarding people, how do you basically give, because you're very passionate about wrestling, as I am, I would imagine you want employees that reflect that mindset of wrestling, right? How do you kind of motivate your staff to be that kind of to have that kind of wrestling mindset, even though they may not have that background,
Well, I think the Redwood Tree culture that we live by is the essence of it. Mm-hmm. So when you think about our core values, one of them is make it happen. And that's really centered around, you may not be able to see, smell, hear, or touch the thing that you're trying to achieve. I want to be a state champion wrestler. I can't, I might be 8 years old at the time or 10 years old at the time. I have no idea how I'm going to get there, right? But the more I work, the more I put my time and effort and energy into the process, suddenly things start to appear. Mm-hmm. And I start to see, oh my God, I have the talent to do that. I can do that. These are the things I need to work on to become a state champion. So it's really about believing in something and then working hard to get there, and that path will start to develop. That's make it happen. Entrepreneurship is one of our core values. It's my favorite core value because I think it most aligns to wrestling. Because anybody, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to express the value of entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. The value of entrepreneurship is simple. It's take responsibility for your outcomes. Period. That's it. Own your experience. One way or another, every consequence, every action that happens to you or that you do to others, you are a part of it. So I don't make excuses for anything that happens to me because I put myself there. Mm-hmm. Other people may have made decisions that caused it, but I was there in that moment. So I tend to take a lot of I take full ownership of my life, all of it. And so I know what it means to get your hand raised or you don't get your hand raised in life and not just in wrestling. And so those values are the things that we talk about. Those are just two of our values, but those are values that we talk about all the time in our business. And what I try to teach our managers and our leaders is that when somebody's doing something that either conflicts with what you want to see happening or it creates some kind of conflict, 99.99% of the time, it's because they're impeding on a core value of our business. Mm-hmm. So you need to look back at our Redwood Tree, understand which value is it that they're not living in that moment, and then use that as a tool to train against. Mm-hmm. Like I want you to know that you're not really owning your experience in this moment. You're not taking responsibility for your outcomes when you're blaming this person on why you didn't do what you were supposed to do.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so that's the way our culture kind of is meant to live in our business. And a lot of things, again, like to your point, not everybody's born as a wrestler. They're not born. They haven't been given the skills that we learn through the sport.
The suffering.
Right, the suffering, learning to love the suffering. And so I do look at our company as, in some ways, as a school. How do we teach people how to what these values really mean and how to live them? It's been cool. I remember one person who's worked with me. She's worked with me for one of our companies out in Oregon, and it wasn't until she heard a speech or a message about values and stuff like that. I believe it was last year actually, and she keeps telling me, she's like, my entire life changed in that moment. Like I've changed how I look at my life. I changed how I approach my life. I changed the people that are surrounded me in my life because I want to be who I want to be. And it's this culture that's helped me get there. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's what it's about for me.
100%, Aaron. So, hey, we're almost at the end here, Aaron. I just want to end with this. I always like ending with just the best life advice you could possibly give, right? To anybody who's out there struggling. I mean, it doesn't have to be wrestling related, business related, just overall life advice you would give to anybody out there. The best life advice, there's a lot of different life advices I can give, but it really is, centered around that entrepreneurship value. When you really learn what it means to take responsibility and to own your outcomes and own your experience, I think it helps you absorb what comes at you in life easier. Mm-hmm. Life is suffering. There's one of the things that I played for my company a couple years ago. It was a speech that Matthew Mcconaughey gave, and it was really cool for me because it helped me understand it. Because my wife would always say, "Aren't you happy? Aren't you happy?" Most of the time, I'm not super happy. I'm because I'm always driving for the next thing. I'm always trying to accomplish the next thing. But what I would say is that if we stop focusing on happiness and start focusing on that there are these moments of joy,
that to me is very connected to and how I look at life today is that I'm no longer just constantly in this pursuit of happiness because I don't believe it exists. But I absolutely believe there are so many opportunities to experience joy in a specific moment. It could be the day you first meet your son or daughter when they're birthed. It could be winning a match in wrestling. It could be getting a sale. Those are joyous moments, and we need to appreciate those moments. They're short-lived because we all, for the most part, are on to the next thing. And what are we building towards to experience that moment of joy? So I absolutely believe that when you own your outcomes and your pursuit is really on those moments of joy and not necessarily focused on like I got to find what makes me happy. Because I think when you really try to find what makes you happy, you get let down a lot. Yeah. Because there's not a lot of things that make you into that place where like, wow, I'm happy all the time. I've never known anybody to be that way. So.
Absolutely. Well, hey, guys, this is episode 19 with Aaron Grossman, and Aaron had an amazing time. Talked a lot of culture, man. I think that's going to be probably on the thumbnail for us. All right. Hey, thank you so much. Episode 19, Elevate Cleveland podcast. Thanks for listening.
Appreciate it.